Salazar. Great to be with you. We have plenty to get to in today's show. The race for the final Champions League spot in the Premier League is on. Manchester United, Leicester City, both in action. We'll recap all of that. Stevie Nicol, Don Hutchison, Shaka, Hislop will be by in just a bit. But we have to start this show in Spain, where Real Madrid are champions of La Liga for a 34th time. This after they defeat Villarreal 2-1. We're joined by Julian Naran and Gab Marcotti. Jules, I'll start with you. Real Madrid, at the beginning of the restart, we said it was very likely they would have to win every single game to overtake Barcelona. They've done it, and they've done it so easily, they've clinched the league with a match still to be played.
You're right, 10 wins out of 10, and they were 2 points behind Barcelona when we restarted La Liga, 6 weeks ago or something, and then they were just unstoppable. They maybe not always the most the other titles that he won before at that club. This one was built on being very strong defensively, being very well organized, playing as a team, and then relying on Karim Benzema.
Another level of Real Madrid. It's almost as if, when you think about it, the Galactico era is well and truly over, in the sense that, you know, Karim Benzema, as fantastic as he was, he isn't a Galactico type as much as he is, you know, a warrior, hard hat type. You go through the team. Eden Hazard out for most of the season. Gareth Bale once again missing in action, other than his shenanigans on the bench. Except for Toni Kroos, Modric as well off the bench a lot of the time. You know, we saw a lot of rotation. We saw a lot of grit. We saw a lot of efficiency. We saw, I think, a side of Zidane, who previously was seen as just kind of like a man manager, a guy who didn't necessarily get too involved so as not to screw things up and just let the players play. We saw a guy who was actually very actively coaching. And when the injured guys came back, he worked them back in. And I think, you know, in some ways, this might be the most satisfying of the titles that Zidane has won.
Jules, so much has been made in recent days of officials, VAR helping out Real Madrid. Even with your Barcelona ways, will you discredit that argument here?
I just think they were the best team all season, really, since they lost against Mallorca in October. I think they've been on another level, really, in terms of, as we said, the results, of course, the way they were playing. Pretty much everything they did was almost perfect. And even with the pandemic and that break, they came back flying, as we said, with those 10 wins. They were so well prepared, far better prepared than Barcelona, for example, both fitness-wise and tactically as well. And I think Zidane deserves a lot of credit. Zidane, it was a priority, did it maybe, as we said, in a very different way, but also him as a manager was very different, and the personnel that he had, especially without Cristiano, was very different. And I think he will take, I think, far more pride in many ways to have won this one, especially considering that Real Madrid hasn't won it since 2017, that it will always, I think, have a very special taste for him, this one.
Gab, not a lot missing from Zidane's managerial resume. What does this title do to it?
I mean, I think it shows that, you know, he can, as I said, he can win in a very, very different context, in a different way. When you look at the injuries they had, the fact that, you know, the newcomers over the summer, people like Jovic and Hazard perhaps didn't contribute the way some might have imagined. And he dealt with it. And he dealt with it very well, and he stayed steady, even as Barcelona had all sorts of issues, and he didn't let Real Madrid's issues affect them. I think that's the main difference. You can chuck in the defeat in the Champions League as well to Manchester City. You know, in the past, that would have had a knock-on effect, or it might have had a knock-on effect. They didn't lose very often, obviously, in the Champions League. But Zidane really insulated the team very well.
Jules, individually, plenty of players to point out, but how about Thibaut Courtois? There was a time when it seemed like Real Madrid fans were really against this guy. He's been arguably their best player over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he has still behind Karim Benzema, please, Sebi. But no, more seriously, he's been fantastic. First goalkeeper as well to win La Liga with the two Madrid side, Atletico and Real Madrid. He will win the Zamora Award and the best goalkeeper in the season without any problems at all. And I think it looks like he's back now to his best level, which maybe we hadn't seen for the last 2 or 3 years, really, and especially last season where he really struggled. But as we said, this time everything very much was built on being very efficient defensively. And to have Ramos and Varane at that kind of level in front of you is a big help. To have Casemiro in the kind of form that he showed since October is a big help as well. But still, he had 1-2 shots per game to deal with, and he usually did that very well. So another reason why they've been so good since the restart and those 10 wins in a row is also because Courtois had been playing at an amazing level.
Jules, you want to talk about Benzema? Okay. What about this penalty kick that Real Madrid attempted? I mean, look, you could say that the title may have felt at that point like it was already won, but Gab, just a strange scene there to see Sergio Ramos try the pass and then Madrid not be able, at least in that attempt, to pull it off. Did you have any problem with it?
I mean, I don't know why people say Sergio, and you don't need to go and make it about you again. You've made 22 in a row. Just go and make it 23, and let's move on.
Jules, any issue with what Benzema did, and Ramos as well?
No, I mean, I agree with Gab. I was there actually when Pires and Henry messed it up against Man City in 2004 at Highbury. And they felt really embarrassed and they could not take it again. So it's a bit of a different one. But listen, they wanted to have a bit of fun. I think that's what it was. They probably tried it at training before. And as Gab said, you try at training and it's all great and you do it. But not everybody can do it like Cruyff and Ajax did all those years ago. And certainly not Henry and Pires, and certainly not Sergio Ramos and Benzema. It happened. Then Benzema scored the second one. And the whole game is over. But yeah, it's not, I mean, when you don't do it perfectly well, it's just not looking great.
Guys, the other side of the title race, of course, Barcelona, they lose today against Osasuna 2-1, 10-man. Osasuna, Gab, this just felt like kind of the end of a total capitulation for Barcelona.
Yeah, this is the bottom falling out at the end of the season, and there's no good way to lose the title, but there are plenty of bad ways, and I think this Barcelona team showed the wrong way to do it.
Ganas, intensity and desire to describe what was wrong with Barcelona, not just in the match today, but the season overall. I mean, we don't hear him speak much.
So because we have not given them anything. And he also went to say that if they keep playing like this in the Champions League when they face Napoli in that second leg of the last 16, they're not going to go through. They'll be out of Europe as well. So you're right, it's rare that he talks, and it's even rarer that he talks like that in those kind of words. We knew he was unhappy because of all the mess that has been created at the club all around him, his war with Abidal and Bartomeu. But for him to talk like that, I mean, this is really when you realize how bad everything is pretty much at that club. And also what was really played the game. And look where he is now, losing to Osasuna at home in the 37th game of the season. It's ridiculous.
I think though, Jules, I mean, I think this was a big call by him, but I think it's what a leader does, right? Whether it's him, I don't know if Gerard Piqué did it in public or if he waited until the dressing room, because this is the kick in the backside you need. You have to regain that intensity because you have a return leg in the Champions League coming up. He even referenced the Champions League directly. Obviously, they're playing Napoli. And, maybe it is good to rock the boat at this stage. Doesn't matter what happens next week, last game of the season. Nobody cares. It's all about what happens against Napoli and going forward. You can still salvage something. And so, Messi, who's been quiet, as you said, most of the season, now is the time to speak. Now is the time to go and ruffle feathers. Now is the time to rock the boat. And I think it was the right call from him. And I didn't see it as an attack on Setien, the way some people have spun it. Some people even suggesting that, that this could cost Setien his job. I saw it as an attack on the whole structure around him from Bartomeu on down, because that is really what has failed Barcelona this season, as much as some of the wacky choices Setien's made.
Let's go there, because in the post-match interview, he also mentions we'll have to change a lot in order to compete for the Champions League. Catalan Radio, one report suggesting that Quique Setien may be, in fact, done at Barcelona. Jules, the Champions League is still out there. Could they? Should they?
I don't know if they could, but it would be a hell of a win if they go all the way and win it, especially as we've seen since the draw last week that they're in the really, really tough part of the draw as well. So they would have to play much better, of course. And Messi is right, with more intensity, with more desire, for sure. Setien, if he's still there, would have to find the right formula and the right tactics first to get over Napoli, and that's not given, as we said, and we've seen Rino Gattuso's team playing really well in the last few weeks since the Serie A restart as well. And then if you go through that, then you have to play probably Bayern. And again, that would be very, very difficult task. So it's not looking good for them winning the Champions League. But you never know when you've got Messi in your team. Anything is possible, of course. But it was interesting to hear Setien as well in his press conference after the game saying, I would like to be there for the Champions League, but I don't know. I don't know if I would be there. I think he knows that this defeat tonight and the way the season has gone since the restart could really cost him his place. I don't know who would come in. I don't know if Xavi can come in from August, have like that Champions League to start his career as a Barcelona manager. I'm not sure if that's the plan. I don't know who else could you give that job if you get rid of Setien, but I'm not sure it would be the best timings and the best idea to get rid of your manager, albeit not having been great in the last few weeks, to go into such a big game against Napoli.
Gab, you suggest that this is rock bottom. If so, why keep Setien?
Because you have a Champions League to play for, and chucking Xavi in there for one game. Xavi, I mean, if they are going to make a change, and I think you make a change when you're convinced the players aren't going to respond. I think Messi's words suggest that the players will respond because they only have so many cracks at the Champions League. For better or worse, they're in a round of 16 game. It's not as if everything Setien's done has been bad. You know, when he turned it around and when he played the diamond with Messi in the hole behind Suarez and Griezmann, you did see signs of progress. And in individual games, and this is what we're talking about, let's not forget, these are all individual games. You got the return leg against Napoli, quarterfinal, semifinal, 90 minutes, mano a mano, individual format. And you know what? In that context, when it's just 90 minutes, most of the time you're going to pick the team that has Lionel Messi in it. So I think you stick with Messi unless there really is something. Sorry, with Setien. Obviously, you stick with Messi. You stick with Setien unless there's some kind of player revolt or whatever else. I think it would be mad to chuck Xavi or somebody else who you're looking at as a permanent manager, chuck him in at the deep end at this stage.
Okay, Jules, I'll give you one more chance to come good on this. Was it a mistake to get rid of Valverde, who won the league?
Of course it was not. Of course it wasn't. It wasn't. And let's not forget, Setien was not first choice either. They didn't sack Valverde to go and get Quique Setien, who was walking his cows when the phone call arrived. That was not the plan initially. They had to do it because the plan A and plan B didn't work out, Xavi and Ronald Koeman. But that was not the plan initially. They had to get rid of Valverde because it was even worse probably than what it is now. Although this is rock bottom, I think it was even more rock bottom before with Valverde. So I agree with Gab. Setien did some good things, some other things that were not very good. But he deserves just a chance to try to put things right, at least against Napoli, and then see after that in the Champions League, where let's not forget everything is on one game. And again, with Messi over one game, anything is possible. So I think he deserves
played a 1-1 draw, as do Everton and Aston Villa. Villa looks sentenced for the championship. But the two big matches featuring Leicester City and Manchester United, both tied on points for fourth, chasing that last Champions League spot. Leicester 2-0 winners over Sheffield United. Manchester United winning 2-0 against Crystal Palace. That leaves the top half of the Premier League looking like this. Chelsea in third, just that 1 point clear of Leicester City, who occupy the fourth and final Champions League spot for now, thanks to goal difference. They got +3 over Manchester United. We're joined by Stevie, Don, and Shaka. For more, Don, I'll start with you on the Manchester United-Crystal Palace match. Should Crystal Palace feel aggrieved? There were a couple decisions, the goal disallowed, a potential penalty shout on Wilfried Zaha in this match.
Well, the penalty was a disgrace. Penalty, don't give it, but it just leaves a bad taste when the referees on the pitch are not going to the monitors.
Shaka, how much did the decisions today play into Manchester United's victory?
Well, clearly they did. That's there for everybody to see. I disagree with Don a little bit. I'm not sure that there was enough there to overturn the decision on the field. If the referee had given it, I don't see how VAR says it's not a penalty. The referee didn't see anything wrong in real time. And similarly, I don't think there was enough there to overturn that decision at all. I think Zaha the decision one way or the other.
But the ruling is, Shaq, if you take the ball and the man, that's still a foul. That is the rule. That is the law.
Yeah, listen, I agree. If the ball's ahead of Zaha and he comes to the back of Zaha and then gets the ball, that's one thing. But I think Zaha kind of runs by the ball in an effort to sell Lindelof and have Lindelof run by him, and just leaves enough of it behind him for Lindelof to get a touch, and as I say, not warrant the VAR overturning the decision.
Stevie, let's leave the penalty shouts for a bit, and we'll focus in on the Manchester United performance. You get a goal from Anthony Martial, you get a goal from Marcus Rashford. What more do you want?
I don't think you want anybody else up front, that's for sure. Listen, for me, the difference between in this game was the forward lines. If you had swapped Martial and Rashford and stuck a Palace jersey on them, Crystal Palace would have won this game. Because as a back four, Manchester United got done. You know, for once, David De Gea has come up with some saves. He's had 2 great saves from Zaha, and he's had a fantastic save from a Milivojevic free kick. So, you know, at the end of the day, this game was all about finishing.
I mean, you know, Martial, I always criticise Martial because I actually love him and I think he's a tremendous player. And the reason why I criticise him is because I want to see more from him. You know, I go back to the Sheffield United 3-3 when Man United played 7 minutes of the game and didn't really turn up. I go back to a performance against Newcastle when they lost 1-0. The Bournemouth game when they lost 1-0 in the driving rain and he didn't fancy it. Everything was just a little bit too cold for him. And then now, all of a sudden, you're seeing the real Anthony Martial. And that's why we are, I think, critical, because we look at his talent and we think he's got blistering pace. He can finish, he can play as a 9, he can play off the left-hand side. And the front 3 at the minute are just absolutely sensational. Bruno Fernandes got voted man of the match over in England, and I actually thought it was one of his quietest games. I thought, for his standards, I actually thought he looked a little bit jaded because he's played a lot of football. But you've got to say, every time United go through midfield and get to the top end of the pitch, they look dangerous every time.
Let's switch gears. The other match of the day, Leicester beating Sheffield United by a final score of 2-0. Look, every time we talk about it on this show, we do almost a daily who's going to finish in the top 4. Leicester City seems to be the team that the analysts on this show drop out. Are we undervaluing what Leicester City has been able to do so far this season, Shaka?
I'm not sure that we're undervaluing it. Finally, Leicester turned up in a game that they absolutely needed to restart. It's tough to predict, and great on them in keeping a clean sheet, because what we saw against Bournemouth, as I mentioned, is as soon as they conceded 1, they just capitulated. So that seems to be their Achilles heel. As long as they can keep things tight at the back, keep the ball out the back of the net, they give themselves a chance. Once they concede, who knows what's going to happen? I've played in teams like that. Leicester seem to be there right now. They now have Spurs. They have to travel to Spurs and then welcome Manchester United to their patch, and that will determine who finishes in the top 4. There's a long way to go yet, despite it only being 100.
No, I'm going to say no. I think just, you know, they take too many chances. Certainly since the league started up again, the chances they have made, they take far too many of them to actually put the ball in the back of the net. Yes, Vardy didn't score today, but after Vardy, you kind of do wonder where the goals are going to come from. Plus the fact of the game, Shaka said, Tottenham and of course Manchester United. So I'm going to say that Leicester will not make the top 4 because of the fixtures they have, and I don't know where the other goals are coming from.
Don, before I get your take, real quick, I want to note Brendan Rodgers has come out and said that James Maddison, Ben Chilwell will be out for the rest of the season. Christian Fuchs probably out for the rest of the season as well. We know it's going to come down probably to that match against Manchester United in 10 days. Can they overcome those absences?
I don't think they can. I commentated on their win tonight, 2-0 against Sheffield United, and it was comfortable. Don't get me wrong, they should have won by 4 or 5. Harvey Barnes missed so many 1v1s. But second half, the flow of the game was leading towards Sheffield United getting back into the game at 1-0. And I think, like Stevie said, when you analyse the games that are coming up, you know, Tottenham, okay, you might give Leicester 3 points against Tottenham at a push, but I don't see them beating Man United on the last day of the season. So unless Chelsea lose their next 2 and have a real wobble, I like Stevie, I think they're going to just miss out, but it's going to be tight.
All right, Don and Shaka, this next one's for you. Stevie will leave you aside as you will be on the show tomorrow. We got the FA Cup semifinals coming up this weekend. Gentlemen, I'll start with you. Don, who do you see making it through to the final?
Oh, Man City all day long. Man City beat Arsenal all day long. Not even at a stretch can Arsenal beat Man City. They're just too good. And the other one, I'm going to lean towards my best buddy, Frank Lampard and Jody Morris. I don't know what the teams are going to be, but I would imagine Chelsea will try and play a more of a fuller strength side than Man United will. So the final is going to be Chelsea and Man City.
Shaka, you got any good friends involved that you want to favor?
No, I don't have access to Don's Rolodex. But I agree with him in that I don't think it'll be much of a competition between City and Arsenal. I think City win that. Now watch Arsenal come and make us both look bad in that regard.
Don't worry, Shaq. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, in the second game, I've often said you give players a reason not to be at their best. They take it 9 times out of 10. I think Solskjaer has done that by complaining about the extra 48 hours that rest that Chelsea has. And to be honest, I think United's bigger focus is in their final two league games, West Ham and then Leicester, which you can fully understand. As a result, I think Chelsea, with less of a concern going into the semi-final, get the better of Manchester United.
League spots all but locked down. Gab and Jules are back with us. Gab, Inter Milan then just 6 points back of Juventus. We know Juventus faces Lazio on Monday. I know it's a big if to suggest Lazio might win that match given their current form, but if it happens, we could very well have a Serie A title race when we thought it was done and dusted.
Yeah, and of course, Juventus last day of the season, they played Roma. The joke all along was that if it's a head-to-head with Lazio, then maybe Roma wouldn't mind losing that game. But you know what? It's probably not going to be, given the way Lazio have been playing. You're right. We all of a sudden, the margins become very, very thin. That's what happens when you concede 9 goals in 3 games and take just 2 points. And the way Lazio have been playing, obviously you're going to favor Juventus because Lazio have been very, very poor. But equally, in some ways, Lazio have been sort of even worse than their results. And I think at some point they have a statement to make. And remember, Lazio have already beaten Juventus twice this season, if you count the Super Cup, and they seem to have the hex over them. So, yeah, this title race, it's as much as we try, it's not going away.
Jules, let's switch gears a little bit. Manchester City look like they've got their deal done for Ferran Torres coming over from Valencia. I know you spoke about it a little bit on Extra Time yesterday, but for those that don't know Torres' game, he's basically suggested to be the Leroy Sané replacement. Is that fair?
It's fair in the sense that they play in the same position because Ferran Torres is a winger, although you would not put it past Pep to reinvent him in a way in another central attacking position. For example, he's such a gifted player technically, he's so elegant, he's quite tall as well, he's 1.84 m, he's only 20, so he will learn a lot. I think working with Pep could do wonders because of how gifted he is, really. So replacement, yes, position for position, but he's a very, very different player than Leroy Sané is, for example. But it would be a great signing, I think, for City, also in the sense that he only has 1 year left on his contract at Valencia, that Valencia is in an absolute mess, and that you could probably sign him for a bargain fee as well. I believe his release clause is 100 million euros, but there's no way City will pay that. Probably half of that, maybe even less than that. To get Ferran Torres at your club would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I know Manchester City probably aren't done adding to their squad, but you surprised that this is where they chose to start another attacking player?
I'm not really, because as Jules says, Ferran Torres is kind of like a piece of clay. People say, oh, look, he's a Sané replacement. Obviously, he's not going to match Sané's pace, but he has a presence about him, and who knows what kind of player he's going to evolve. And remember, David Silva is leaving. We might see Phil Foden play more inside. Surely Bernardo Silva already made that transition to playing more inside. Ferran Torres might do the same thing. So I'm not, obviously we're going endlessly about how they need to add a defender at the back. And I agree with that. But equally, they need to also manage their squad because players are getting older. They're going to have a big call to make on Kevin De Bruyne's contract as well. So Ferran Torres.
Away on ESPN at 8 o'clock. ESPN 2 Sporting Kansas City, Colorado Rapids. Also 8 o'clock, and then nightcap. Real Salt Lake, Minnesota United, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Quarterfinals start on Friday at the NWSL Challenge Cup. Here's what the preliminary round looks like. North Carolina Courage sweeping through it. They went 4-0 undefeated, and they end up with the #1 seed. For plenty more on the tournament, we welcome in Julie Foudy. Julie, let's start with this North Carolina Courage team. They've won the last 2 NWSL championships. They've won the last 3 NWSL supporter shields. Why are they so much better than everybody else?
Well, one, Sebastian, they're stacked with just a ton of talent. I mean, you go down the list of, and beyond national team, you talk about a team that wants to just run through a wall for their coach, Paul Riley. They talk about that all the time. Sam Mewis, I didn't even say her name. Sam Mewis will talk about, their famous face the wind and take on whatever comes at them. And for them to have an underdog mentality still, which is always Paul Riley's sign and calling sign, and that they've won the last 2 NWSL titles tells you everything you need to know.
Julie, when this tournament started, we lamented that there wouldn't be some of the big-name national teamers there. Megan Rapinoe, Kristen Press, Tobin Heath, Carly Lloyd, just to name a few. But the national team is still paying attention. We got Vlatko Andonovski, who's been at the games. We know Kate Markgraf, our former colleague here at ESPN, the GM now for the U.S. women's national team, has been watching as well. Of the players outside the pool, who has made the most noise in the preliminary round of this tournament to get into that pool?
That's a good one. I think you could make a case for quite a few, but the one that I'm interested in, and this is a position that's an interesting one on the national team because Alyssa Nair is 32, Ashlyn Harris is 34, is Bella Bixby. And this is the goalkeeper who came in for the injured Adie Franch for the Portland Thorns, 24 years old, drafted late in the 3rd round in 2018. She spent the last 2 years essentially injured and fighting to get into even into the lineup, into the roster. She's been a 3rd string backup goalkeeper essentially for the Thorns. Played at Oregon State, so she loves and would love to stay in Oregon, and she has had an outstanding Challenge Cup. She's been good, she's been clean, and so that's been an interesting story to follow because of, as I was saying before, Adie Franch is a very good goalkeeper. However, they're going to start looking at who's that next line of goalkeepers for the national team, and they're going to start looking at bringing in some young kids, and Bella Bixby might be on that list.
You mentioned the Portland Thorns. They finished 8th in the preliminary phase of this tournament. Let's take a look at the matchups in the quarterfinals. If there is such thing as an NWSL Classico, we have it in that 1-8 matchup, North Carolina Courage against the Portland Thorns. Some other great matchups as well. Houston Dash, Utah Royals. That's the 5-4. Then you got Washington against Sky Blue on Saturday. Olympique Lyon Reign against Chicago Red Stars on Saturday night. We focus a lot on North Carolina Courage so far, Julie. Of the other teams, or maybe even of those other quarterfinal matchups, what are you most excited to see?
I actually want to see Washington Spirit Sky Blue. I mean, I know Sky Blue has had its struggles over the years, and they're missing Carly Lloyd, they're missing Mal Pugh.
Documented as a huge success for the National Women's Soccer League. They haven't had any positive cases of COVID-19. They haven't had any player complaints. They haven't had any matches postponed. We know that's not easy. We've seen Major League Soccer struggle with those aspects of putting on a tournament. Why do you think the NWSL has been so successful, and what do you think this means for the league's future?
Well, one, I think it helps not being in Florida. 2, it helps that you only have 9 teams compared to 26, or other leagues, which obviously are much bigger in size. NWSL, of course, had its own source of controversy early on with their Orlando team not being able to even travel into Utah. But yeah, they've had no incidents of COVID, no positive tests on the player side.